When Mike discovers his wife Emma's affair, his world shatters. Determined to make her pay, he meticulously plans the ultimate revenge, exposing her lies in front of her friends, colleagues, and clients, destroying her reputation, and stripping her of everything she loves. But just when he thinks he's won, a tragic twist leaves him questioning everything. As Emma's life crumbles, Mike is forced to confront the cost of his vengeance, and whether justice was worth the heartbreak that followed. A gripping tale of betrayal, retribution, and the haunting consequences of revenge. Marriage isn't supposed to feel like a job, but for me, it did. I used to believe it was because I worked too hard, long days running my contracting business, followed by weekends catching up on paperwork. Emma, my wife of 7 years, always told me it was worth it. "You're building something for us, something we can be proud of," she'd say with that dazzling smile of hers. I believed her. I believed every word. Back then, I would have moved heaven and earth for Emma. She wasn't just my wife, she was the person who made me feel like I could conquer the world. She had this energy about her, charming, ambitious, always looking ahead. When we met, I was just another guy trying to make ends meet. Emma pushed me to dream bigger. She encouraged me to start my own business, and when it took off, I thought we were unstoppable. I thought we were a team. I was wrong. The first signs were subtle, little things that didn't seem important at the time. Emma started spending more time on her phone, but who wasn't glued to their screen these days? When I'd ask what she was up to, she'd shrug and say, "Just work stuff." I didn't press her on it. She'd always been independent, and I respected that. Besides, I was busy too busy to notice how often she'd slip away to take a call, or how late her work dinners were running. But then there was the night she came home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. I didn't say anything. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was just being paranoid. Emma had always been beautiful, and she liked to dress up for work events. Maybe I was just overthinking it. Maybe I was tired from work. But no matter how much I tried to brush it off, the doubts started to creep in. It got worse from there. She became distant, emotionally, physically. Conversations that used to flow effortlessly now felt strained, like she was always 1 foot out the door. She wasn't home as much, and when she was, she seemed distracted. I'd catch her smiling at her phone, texting someone with a kind of excitement I hadn't seen in years. When I asked her about it, she'd roll her eyes and say, "You're being ridiculous. It's work, okay?" I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The breaking point came on a Saturday night. I had the rare luxury of finishing work early and decided to surprise Emma with dinner at her favorite restaurant. I even called ahead and reserved a table, picturing her face lighting up when I told her. But when I got home, she was already dressed up, fixing her hair in the mirror. She looked stunning, like she had just stepped out of a magazine. "Wow," I said, standing in the doorway. "You look amazing." She glanced at me, barely acknowledging the compliment. "Thanks," she said, grabbing her purse. "I have a dinner tonight." "A work dinner?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Yeah," she said, avoiding my eyes. "It's with some new clients. Really important. Do you want me to drop you off?" I offered. "I can pick you up later too." "No, it's fine," she said quickly, a little too quickly. "I've got it covered." She kissed me on the cheek, barely, and walked out the door. I stood there, watching her leave, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Something wasn't adding up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every odd moment from the past few months. Her late nights, the phone calls she wouldn't answer around me, the way she pulled away whenever I tried to get close. I hated the way it made me feel, suspicious, paranoid, like I was losing my grip. This wasn't who I was. This wasn't who we were. Or so I thought. The next morning, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I waited until Emma was in the shower and grabbed her phone from the nightstand. My hands were shaking as I unlocked it. She hadn't even bothered to change the passcode. At first, there was nothing out of the ordinary, work emails, group chats with her friends. But then I saw a name I didn't recognize, Mark. The messages were buried in her chat history, like she tried to hide them but hadn't been thorough enough. I opened the thread, and there it was. A flood of texts, photos, and inside jokes that made my stomach turn. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. Me too. I can't wait until we can be alone again. The timestamps lined up perfectly with her so-called work dinners. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My hands went numb, my chest tightened, and for a moment, I thought I might throw up. This couldn't be real. Emma, my wife, the woman who had stood beside me through everything, was cheating on me. I put the phone back before she came out of the bathroom, acting like nothing had happened. But inside, I was spiraling. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed to know more. I needed proof. The next day, I hired a private investigator. It felt wrong, like I was stooping to a level I didn't want to be on. But what choice did I have? If Emma was lying to me, I needed to know the whole truth. I gave the PI her schedule, her frequent hangouts, and even a photo of her and her car. Just find out if there's anything going on, I told him. I need to know for sure. For a week, I waited. Every time Emma left the house, I wondered if she was meeting him. Every time she came home late, I imagined them together. It was torture, but I had to hold it together. If she noticed anything different about me, she didn't show it. When the PI finally called, I wasn't ready for what he had to say. You were right, he said. I followed her to a restaurant downtown. She met with a guy, Mark, I assume, and they were, well, let's just say they weren't talking about work. I've got photos if you want to see them. Photos. Proof. Evidence that everything I'd suspected was true. My heart sank, and yet, somewhere deep inside, I felt a flicker of something else, anger. This wasn't just betrayal. This was disrespect. Humiliation. And if Emma thought she could get away with it, she had no idea who she was dealing with. I didn't look at the photos right away. I couldn't. Instead, I sat in my truck outside the PI's office, staring at the envelope in my lap. My hands were trembling, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, to throw the evidence in her face and demand answers. But another part of me, darker, colder, had a different idea. If she wanted to destroy my life, I was going to make sure hers came crashing down first. That envelope sat in my truck for hours before I opened it. It was like a bomb I didn't want to detonate, but I knew I had to. When I finally peeled it open, my hands were trembling. The photos slid out, one by one, each more damning than the last. There they were, Emma and Mark, sitting across from each other at a dimly lit restaurant, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. In one shot, he had his hand on hers. In another, they were leaving the restaurant, his arm draped casually around her shoulders. And the one that broke me? Them in the parking lot, locked in a kiss so passionate it made me sick. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive home, kick the door open, and confront her right then and there. But I stopped myself. Confronting her would accomplish nothing. It wouldn't erase the betrayal or the humiliation. And it wouldn't fix the damage she'd already done to me. If anything, it would give her the upper hand, a chance to deny it, twist the story, maybe even turn it around on me. No. I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. If Emma had decided to betray me, I was going to make sure she paid for it. I spent the rest of the evening sitting in my truck, staring at those photos, thinking about everything I'd sacrificed for her. The long hours I worked so she could live comfortably. The vacations I saved up for, the gifts, the constant support for her career. I had built a life for us, for her, and she'd taken all of it for granted. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the disrespect, the lies, the complete disregard for everything we'd built together. She had no idea what she had started. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but the meeting was surprisingly clinical. The lawyer, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, listened patiently as I laid out my situation. When I showed him the photos, he nodded, almost as if he saw this kind of thing every day, which, I suppose, he did. "Well," he said, leaning back in his chair, "the good news is that you're in a strong position. The house is in your name, correct?" "Yes." "And the car?" "Mine too." "What about bank accounts? Do you share any joint accounts?" "We do," I admitted, "but most of my money is in a separate account for my business." "That's good," he said, jotting down notes. "That'll protect you financially. Now, with the evidence you've gathered, you can file for divorce on the grounds of adultery. Courts take that seriously. We can use it to ensure she gets as little as possible." As little as possible. Those words stuck with me. Emma had spent years enjoying the life I'd worked my ass off to provide. The thought of her walking away with any piece of it made my blood boil. She didn't deserve the house. She didn't deserve the car. She didn't deserve a dime of my hard-earned money. And I was going to make sure she got exactly what she deserved, nothing. But this wasn't just about the divorce. Taking away the material things wouldn't be enough. Emma was proud of her career, her reputation, her perfect little life. If I wanted her to feel the pain she'd caused me, I had to hit her where it hurt the most. And I knew exactly how to do it. Over the next few weeks, I played the role of the perfect husband. I kissed her goodbye in the mornings, asked about her day when she got home, even planned a date night or two. If she noticed anything different about me, she didn't let on. Maybe she thought I was oblivious. Maybe she thought she was getting away with it. Either way, it didn't matter. Every time she smiled at me, every time she lied to my face, it only fueled my resolve. I started gathering more evidence, texts, emails, anything I could find that tied her to Mark. I made copies of her bank statements, looking for any suspicious charges. Sure enough, there were dinners at fancy restaurants, hotel stays, even a weekend getaway I hadn't known about. I printed everything out, neatly organizing it into a file. When the time came, I wanted to have all my ducks in a row. But it wasn't just about the evidence. I wanted to understand her. I wanted to know why she'd done it. So, one night, while she was asleep, I unlocked her phone again and read through her messages with Mark. It was like a punch to the gut. They talked about everything, work, dreams, even things I thought had been special between Emma and me. Mark wasn't just some fling. He was a replacement, a new chapter in her life she thought she could start while keeping me in the background. What hurt the most were the messages where she complained about me. "He's so boring," she wrote in one. "All he does is work. He doesn't make me feel special anymore." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my breathing steady. Didn't make her feel special. Was that why she betrayed me? Because I was too busy building a life for us to shower her with constant attention? The audacity of it made my blood boil. But at the same time, it gave me clarity. Emma didn't care about loyalty or commitment. She cared about herself, her needs, her desires. She wanted to have her cake and eat it too. Well, not anymore. I decided to let her continue her little charade for a while longer. The longer I waited, the more evidence I could gather, and the more meticulous my plan could be. But I also started making subtle moves to protect myself. I opened a new bank account and began transferring money into it, little by little, so she wouldn't notice. I stopped contributing to our joint account entirely. If she asked about it, I'd say business was slow. She didn't seem to care. At the same time, I began quietly laying the groundwork to expose her. Emma had a big event coming up, a gala she'd been planning for months. It was the crown jewel of her career, the kind of event that could make or break her reputation. She'd been working late nights, obsessing over every detail, telling me how important it was for everything to go perfectly. I knew it was the perfect stage for her downfall. I wasn't just going to end our marriage. I was going to end her image of perfection, the facade she'd spent years building. Emma thought she could control everything, manipulate everyone around her to fit her narrative. She had no idea I was about to flip the script. The night before the gala, she was buzzing with excitement. She'd spent hours picking out the perfect dress, making sure every detail was flawless. As we sat down to dinner, she smiled at me, the kind of smile that used to make me feel like the luckiest man in the world. "Thank you for being so supportive," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I know I've been so busy with work, but it means a lot to me that you've been so understanding." I smiled back, forcing myself to play the part. "Of course," I said. "I'm proud of you." And I meant it, proud of how good she was at lying, at pretending everything was fine. But tomorrow, the truth would come out. And when it did, her entire world would come crashing down. The morning of the gala, Emma was like a whirlwind of excitement and nerves. She was up at dawn, running through last-minute details on her phone, practicing her speech in the mirror, and triple-checking the guest list. I watched her from the kitchen, sipping my coffee, wondering if she had any clue what was coming. She was so consumed with herself that it was almost laughable. Almost. By the time we got in the car, she was all smiles, radiating confidence. She looked beautiful, of course, Emma always did. She wore a sleek black gown that hugged her figure perfectly, her hair pinned up in an elegant twist. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have been proud to have her on my arm. But instead, I felt nothing but cold determination. Tonight, she wasn't going to just lose me, she was going to lose everything. We arrived at the venue, a stunning ballroom draped in gold and white, and Emma immediately slipped into hostess mode. She floated through the crowd, greeting guests, charming everyone she spoke to. Her laugh echoed across the room, light and musical, the kind of laugh that made people think she was the perfect wife, the perfect woman. For years, I'd believed it too. But tonight, I was going to shatter that illusion in front of everyone who mattered to her. I waited until the room was packed, the air buzzing with conversation and clinking glasses. Emma was on stage, thanking everyone for coming and talking about how proud she was of the event. I stood at the back of the room, watching her bask in the spotlight, completely unaware of what was about to happen. When she finished her speech, I stepped forward. "Emma," I said, my voice cutting through the applause like a knife. "Before you leave the stage, there's something I think everyone here should know." The room went silent. Emma froze, her smile faltering as she turned to look at me. "What are you doing?" she hissed, her eyes narrowing. "I just wanted to take a moment to share how proud I am of you," I said, keeping my tone calm and steady. "This event is truly spectacular. But since we're celebrating integrity and honesty tonight, I think it's only fair to share the truth about the woman who made it all happen." Her face went pale. "Stop it," she whispered, her voice low and trembling. But I wasn't stopping. Not now. I pulled my phone from my pocket and held it up, the screen already displaying one of the photos the PI had taken. "This," I said, turning the screen toward the audience, "is Emma and her business partner, Mark. Not exactly the kind of work dinner she's been telling me about, is it?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. People started whispering, their eyes darting between me and Emma. Her mask of composure was crumbling fast, her hands trembling as she reached for the microphone. "This is not the time or place for this," she stammered, her voice shaky. "We can talk about this later." "Oh, I think it's exactly the right time," I said, my voice rising. "You've spent months lying to me, to everyone, pretending to be this perfect wife, this perfect professional. But here's the truth, Emma, you're a liar and a cheat. And now, everyone here knows it. She tried to grab the microphone from me, but I stepped back, holding it out of her reach. Don't worry, I said, addressing the crowd. I've got plenty of evidence to back this up. I'll be sending it to anyone who wants to see it. Just shoot me an email. The whispers turned into full-blown murmurs, and Emma looked like she might collapse on the spot. Her colleagues, her clients, even her friends, every single person she'd spent years impressing, were now staring at her with shock, disgust, and pity. She fled the stage, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she disappeared into the back of the room. I watched her go, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. I'd done what I set out to do. I'd exposed her. I'd humiliated her. But instead of feeling triumphant, all I felt was, tired. When we got home that night, Emma didn't say a word. She went straight upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to say. The next morning, I served her the divorce papers. You can't be serious, she said, staring at the stack of documents on the kitchen table. Her eyes were bloodshot, her makeup smeared from crying. She looked like a shadow of the woman who had been on stage just hours before. Oh, I'm serious, I said, my voice cold. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll be hearing from mine soon. But we can work this out, she pleaded, her voice cracking. Please, let's just talk about this. I laughed bitterly. Work this out? You've been sleeping with another man for months, Emma. The only thing we're working out is how fast you can get out of my house. Her face twisted with anger. Your house. I'm the one who made this place a home. I'm the one who kept this marriage together while you were too busy working to even notice me. That hit a nerve, but I didn't let it show. You kept the marriage together by screwing someone else. Nice try, Emma. But the judge is going to love hearing that argument. She opened her mouth to say something else, but I didn't give her the chance. I picked up the stack of papers and shoved them into her hands. Sign the papers, Emma. The sooner you do, the sooner you can go run off to Mark and ruin his life too. She didn't sign them right away, of course. She tried to fight me, tried to argue, negotiate, even threaten. But she had no leverage. The house was in my name. The car was in my name. The evidence of her affair was airtight. And once my lawyer filed the paperwork, she realized she was out of options. By the time the divorce was finalized, Emma was a shell of the woman she used to be. She lost everything, the house, the car, even her career. Word of the gala scandal had spread, and no one wanted to work with her anymore. She had to move in with her parents, and last I heard, she and Mark didn't even last a month. Turns out, cheating isn't the best foundation for a relationship. As for me, I'm doing better than I expected. It wasn't easy picking up the pieces, but there's a strange kind of peace that comes with knowing you stood up for yourself. Emma may have tried to destroy me, but in the end, she was the one who lost everything. And I have no regrets. The weeks after the divorce were quiet, almost eerily so. For the first time in years, the house felt empty. No more late-night arguments, no more awkward silences at the dinner table. Just me and the hollow echoes of a life I thought I'd built with someone who truly loved me. I told myself I was better off, that Emma had gotten what she deserved. And yet, as the days dragged on, I couldn't shake the sense of finality, like I hadn't just lost a marriage, I'd lost a part of myself. I threw myself into work, hoping it would fill the void. And for a while, it worked. Business was steady, the crew relied on me, and I stayed busy enough to avoid thinking about the life I used to have. But every now and then, I'd catch myself staring at the empty space on the bed where Emma used to sleep, or flipping through old photos on my phone before quickly shoving it in a drawer. I hated myself for missing her, even after everything she'd done. It wasn't the person she had become that I missed. It was the person I thought she was. One night, about 3 months after the divorce, I got a call. It was from Emma's mom. I hadn't heard from her since everything fell apart, and the sound of her voice immediately put me on edge. "Mike," she said, her voice trembling, it's Emma. She's in the hospital." For a moment, I couldn't speak. "What happened?" I finally asked, my throat dry. "There was an accident," she said, struggling to hold back tears. She was drinking, and she lost control of her car. It flipped. They said she hit a tree." I gripped the phone so tightly it hurt. "Is she?" I stopped myself, not sure if I wanted to hear the answer. "She's alive," her mom said quickly, "but it's bad, Mike. She's in surgery now. They don't know if she's going to make it." I sat there, stunned, the phone pressed to my ear. Emma, the woman I had once loved more than anything, the woman I had just torn apart in every way I could, was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life. For all the anger I had felt, for all the satisfaction I'd taken in watching her fall, I hadn't expected this. I hadn't wanted this. "Which hospital?" I asked quietly. She told me, and before I knew it, I was in my truck, driving through the dark streets toward the ICU. I told myself it was just to check on her, to get closure, maybe to remind myself that I wasn't completely heartless. But deep down, I knew the truth. No matter how much I tried to hate her, part of me still cared. When I arrived at the hospital, Emma's mom and dad were in the waiting room, their faces pale and drawn. Her mom hugged me the moment she saw me, sobbing into my shoulder. "She's still in surgery," she said through her tears. "They've been in there for hours." Her dad gave me a curt nod, his expression a mix of worry and quiet resentment. He hadn't forgiven me for exposing Emma at the gala or for how the divorce played out. But right now, none of that seemed to matter. We were all just waiting, trapped in a limbo where every second felt like an eternity. Eventually, the surgeon came out. He was a tall man with tired eyes, his scrubs stained with blood. "She's stable," he said, and we all let out a collective breath of relief. "But her injuries are severe. She has multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and significant trauma to her head. We've done everything we can, but it's going to be touch and go for the next 24 hours. Her mom broke down again, and even her dad looked like he might cry. I just stood there, numb, trying to process what he was saying. Emma was alive, but barely. And there was no guarantee she'd stay that way. When they finally let us see her, I almost didn't recognize her. She was hooked up to machines, tubes running everywhere, her face bruised and swollen. Her once vibrant eyes were closed, her body unnaturally still. The woman who had once been so full of life now looked so small, so fragile. It didn't seem real. Her mom and dad sat by her bedside, holding her hands and whispering words of encouragement. I stayed back, not sure if I had any right to be there. After everything we'd been through, what was I supposed to say? That I was sorry? That I didn't mean for things to end like this? None of it would change what had happened, or what I had done. Hours passed, and eventually, her parents left to get some rest. I stayed behind, sitting in the corner of the room, listening to the steady beep of the heart monitor. I didn't know why I was still there, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. I kept thinking about all the times we'd laughed together, all the memories we'd made in the early years of our marriage. I thought about the person she used to be before everything went wrong, before we both became strangers to each other. "I didn't want this," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of the machines. "I just wanted you to understand how much you hurt me. I never wanted you to get hurt too." Her fingers twitched slightly, and for a moment, I thought she might wake up. But her eyes stayed closed, her breathing shallow and labored. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, and let out a shaky breath. I don't know if you can hear me, Emma, but I'm sorry. For everything. Emma made it through the night, but she wasn't the same. The head trauma left her with partial memory loss and permanent cognitive impairments. She couldn't return to work. She couldn't live on her own. Her parents took her in, and from what I heard, she spent most of her days in physical therapy or staring blankly out the window. I visited her once, a few months after the accident. Her mom invited me over, saying Emma had been asking about me. When I arrived, she was sitting in the garden, her hair hanging limp around her face. She looked up when I approached, and for a moment, there was a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "Mike," she said softly, her voice thin and uncertain. "You came." "Yeah," I said, sitting down beside her. "How are you feeling?" She shrugged, looking down at her hands. "Tired. Everything's fuzzy." We talked for a while, but it wasn't the same. She struggled to find her words, to piece together her thoughts. At one point, she looked at me and said, "I don't remember everything that happened, but I know I hurt you. I'm sorry." I didn't know what to say. She was already broken, there was no point in piling on more guilt. So I just nodded and said, "I'm sorry too." As I drove home that day, I realized something I hadn't before. Revenge had felt good in the moment, but in the end, it hadn't fixed anything. Emma's life was ruined, but so was mine in its own way. The anger, the hurt, it was still there, eating away at me, no matter how much I tried to pretend otherwise. And now, it was too late to undo any of it. I had won the war, but the victory felt hollow. Because the truth was, no matter how much I hated what Emma had done to me, a part of me would always love the person she used to be. And now, she was gone forever.